The National Security Council has dispelled any heightened sense of insecurity in the nation's capital, Abuja, as unnecessary and irresponsible, while urging Nigerians to remain calm. The National Security Advisor, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Chief of Defense Staff, and as well as the head of the Nigerian Intelligence Agency all jointly briefed State House correspondents at the end of the emergency security meeting chaired by President Muhammadu Buhari. According to the NSA, Babagana Monguno, the meeting basically was to discuss the recent happenings within the Federal Capital Territory and certain declarations and alerts coming from various quarters, insinuating growing insecurity and threat to security within the FCT and environments. He says the country and the capital remain secured, contrary to the alerts issued by citizens to their citizens living in the capital of Abuja. Meanwhile, Nigeria's Police Inspector General Alkali Baba Usman, he's dismissed the travel advisories issued by the US, UK, and some Western countries to their citizens on elevated terror threats in Abuja as fake news. He appeals to the Nigerian media not to transmit such news stories, describing them as inciting, fake, and demeaning. The IGP was speaking at the inauguration of modern police stations in Delta and Edo states in continuation of his infrastructural and capacity building drive to motivate personnel towards effective policing.
Forget about all this international conspiracy and efforts to bring down the efforts of government. Unnecessary security alerts that does not have any meaning. And therefore, I also want to appeal to our media that you should not be used as tools of transmitting false news, fake news, inciting news that are fake, that are meant to bring us down. If you have any good intention and you see that there is something that is coming to harm me, why can't you come and tell me that, look, there is something that is coming to harm you? This is how I have gotten the information. Try to see what you can do. Instead of saying, all my citizens, come back or don't go out on so date because there is going to be threat. You didn't tell me the security alert. You are in my country, or you are in my territory, or you are in my place. But you want to tell your people. I mean, it doesn't make sense. Be that as it may, we'll make efforts to douse it, and we are proving that what they are saying are not true. And even if it is true, we have taken measures to forestall it.
Well, joining us now to analyze the security situation in Nigeria and the likely impact on the conduct of the 2023 general elections against the backdrop of calls for the suspension of campaign are security analyst Dr. Kabir Adamu and Temitope Olodo. Great to have you both on Newsday. Thank you for joining us for this discussion.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Dr. Kabir.
Thank you, Hawa. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Let's start with you, Dr. Kabir. The last time we were on here, of course, discussing security situations. Now we have a situation where terror alert or terror advisory went out over the weekend. Of course, from the clip that we just played, it seems to be more of a power play that's going on enshrined in an ego battle. How much do we put ourselves in danger if we don't pay attention to all threats that are issued to us, whether or not they are real or fake? Is there a sense in just disregarding terror threats when they are issued, especially if they're not issued from our own authorities? Should this be something that we ignore or should we be vigilant?
No, definitely we should be vigilant. Ever feed into an intelligence, collection capability should be taken seriously. No information on the face of it should be discarded. However, what we should do is take up that information, attempt to verify it. We have a common saying in security that you hope for the best, but plan for the worst. So in this instance, we've been told that the worst is about to happen. What the logical thing to do is to plan against that worst and then hope for the best. In other words, not to discard that information, take it seriously, and then go about the intelligence cycle of trying to verify until you reach a point where you now conclude that, no, this is maybe a false interpretation of an intelligence or information that was collected. But suffice to say, what I've seen the Nigerian authorities do in terms of security presence in Abuja does not indicate that they discarded the information. Rather, what I'm hearing is that that information was not shared with the Nigerian authorities. Those are two different things.
Well, Temitope, obviously from what Dr. Adamu said, we cannot say that the security forces are discrediting or dismissing, these terror alerts, even though they're trying to downplay it verbally. We know they've carried out raids, they've arrested some suspects, there's heightened police presence in the FCT, but is this enough? What about other states of the Federation? Are they not also vulnerable to attacks?
Thank you so much for that brilliant question. I think I have to agree with my brother, Dr. Kabiru. The bottom line is, if they're calling it, if they're saying it's insignificant, calling it fake news, yeah, they've taken preemptive intervention measures. It shows that they are taking it serious. They're speaking for both sides of the mouth. As far as I'm concerned, and I agree with you that it's not just about just looking at measures within Abuja, but looking at all the 36 states, because in all those 36 states, we've got police stations, we've got, DSS office. It's just a matter of sending circulars. It's just being vigilant. As I speak, I work in this industry, just like my brother, my good brother there, and we know that when these things are given, just like when you go to a pastor and they lay hands on you and say, oh, we see danger coming, all you do is just take some precautions, and then you are able to avert it. The fact that we know about it means that the likelihood of it happening is reduced significantly. And that's the purpose of this advisory. Americans have been doing it for a long time. The British have been doing it for a long time. And if you look at WikiLeaks, which was leaked those days, we know that most of this information are even coming from our own people that work for this authority. So it's not like these informations are taken from the blue. When you're talking about risk management, that is what it's all about. Every organization does it. Every organization have their risks. They look at it and say, oh, what about if our chief director dies? They're not wishing their chief director to die. They're just saying that if he dies, what are the measures we put in place? What are the mitigating circumstances? That is all it's all about. The fact that we're panicking about it, the way we've handled it, shows how immature we are. If you look at the South Africa, who does not even come up on the terrorism index, you find out that even when they heard about it, the president said, oh, we engaged with them to find out what is those information, and we started working with them to deal with it. They're not coming up with all this analysis and saying they are fake news. So I'm hoping that our leaders, especially our security leadership, will look at things differently and start working more rather than just talking and even heightening the situation with their rhetorics.
Thank you for that. Dr. Kabiru, can we speak a bit about the chain of command when it comes to disseminating security information, if there is one? Because obviously from the discussions being had, and you mentioned it as well, the issue is more where the information came from and how it was disseminated, and the lack of carrying along of the Nigerian government, so to speak. So between the U.S. Commission, the UK High Commission, and when they're present in Nigeria, are there ways, or is there a certain rollout of how information is to be shared between governments, or even internationally? How do governments share their information in a way that the sovereign government doesn't feel like toes are being stepped on or they are being overlooked, so we can avoid an ego issue. Is there a chain of command for information dissemination?
So not necessarily a chain of command, but then there are two sides to this. Number one is the statutory responsibility that every country has to its citizens. And irrespective of the fact that this is international relations between two countries, that statutory responsibility cannot be taken away from that country. In other words, if that country comes across any information that could harm its citizens, it is obliged by law to share that information with its citizens. Now, the second part of that is the fact that there are diplomatic principles and practices that guide the relationship between two countries, especially, and I want to underline this word, where there are friendly countries, there are allies. And so it is almost obligatory for either side to support peaceful existence in another country. That means, for instance, no party can carry out any action that would affect the internal security of the other party. And if that happens, it is almost obligatory for that country to help the other country come out of that difficult situation. Now, having said all of that, let me go to the field of intelligence, which all of this is revolves around. There are liaison arrangements, intelligence liaison arrangement around the world, where two friendly countries, in certain instances, even where there are no friendly countries, enter into agreement to exchange intelligence information. And that means, for instance, if country A is in possession of any information, it will approach country B and share that intelligence with it. Now, as far as I know, this type of platforms exist between Nigeria and the US and between Nigeria and the UK. And so it is expected that if the US or the UK was privy to any information regarding a threat development within Nigeria or even any neighboring country to Nigeria, it would approach the Nigerian side and make available that information with certain provisos. One of the provisos is the confidentiality of that information. And another proviso, for instance, is the use of that intelligence. Of course, it would never be used to harm the citizen of the given country, and several other conditions that perhaps the two countries would have entered into. So what I'm hearing from the Nigerian side, if you pick up the statements that followed the terror alert up until today, is that the Nigerian side were not taken into confidence that the information was not shared with the Nigerian side. Now, whether that is true or not, unfortunately, you and I cannot determine, but we're just interpreting what the government officials, including the SSS, the police, in the clip that you showed, and then the statement by the DG of the NIA as well as the National Security Advisor. So what do we do in this circumstance, especially since we're dealing with friendly countries? The relationship between the US and Nigeria is excellent as far as I know. That is why you have diplomatic structures. One of the simplest ways to kind of iron this is for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to invite the American ambassador, the UK High Commissioner, have a friendly conversation with them and ask clear questions regarding the information that was emanated. And if there were things that were missed out, I guess that kind of conversation would iron it out. And they will leave that meeting shaking hands, and then perhaps a follow-up message, an alert, call it whatever, would be released to douse this tension. What is not acceptable, and I want to emphasize this, is the situation that we're in Nigeria, Abuja. The alert and the travel advisory that was updated by these countries has created a ripple effect within the economy in Abuja that is not acceptable. If you talk to the hospitality industries, I've got friends in five-star hotels in Abuja, and their business is suffering, and all because of that alert. And frankly, no follow-up action by either the US or the UK government to douse the tension that was created by.
Well, Temitope, now this alert comes at a time when political parties have begun campaign for the 2023 elections. And some analysts are suggesting that Some analysts are suggesting that this alert by foreign embassies might be a form of subtle interference in our electioneering process. I'd just like to have your take on that. And is it possible that any likely attack might be politically motivated?
I personally do not believe that Americans and the British are friends. They're training as we speak. They are training our troops. They are sharing intelligence with us. And we know from the Kuje prison and other incidents that have happened that intelligence sometimes are held by some of our colleagues. Now, this is not something new because even in the UK, where they have very excellent intelligence, the lack of sharing of intelligence more or less contributed to the July 7 bombing in London that created what was called the Office of Security and Counterterrorism, which is the office where I work. The lack of sharing of information led to the 9/11 and led to the creation of the coordinating office for the home security, homeland security. So they've learned their lesson that when they don't share information, it could lead to trouble. I don't think that they will hold information from us. I don't see why they want to do that. And just like Dr. Kabiru has said, the Nigerian government could easily have invited the ambassador. And let me be very, very clear, because I worked in this industry and I know that this kind of intelligence are very, very straightforward. For our political elite and campaign, I don't think it will actually have any impact on our campaign. Let's be clear, because all you need to do is just heighten the security. As we speak, Nigeria has a terror list level. Have we seen it being activated? Have we seen it being improved? Have they come up to say that, oh, now our threat level has been moved to severe or moved lower? They've not said that. And that's because Nigeria is not used to using these things. But as we speak, even in my neighborhood here in Kent, we have a threat level that we go through. So it's not something new in Europe. We're the ones that are being emotionally overheated on this matter. For them, it's a normal thing that we do. When I go to my office, I have to bring up my things. I have to go through an airport-style approach. Whether I'm a director or I'm a junior staff, we all go through the same thing. Nigeria has a problem with this, and that is the reason why Nigeria needs to put its house in order. For me, I don't think there is any interference with our politics. In fact, I think it's even good for our politics that our people will start checking, the ground, doing the necessary things, and employing people like Dr. Kabiru is on ground to help them look at their risk management for election. Because we know that Nigeria is going through a lot. If people could attack the president's convoy, if they could bring down a aircraft, then anything can happen in Nigeria. But we're not saying it will happen. All we're saying is let's just be vigilant. But I don't think they're interfering with our politics. That's my personal opinion, and I'm talking from experience in this field.
All right, Dr. Kabiru, I'd actually like to throw that same question to you as well. Do you think that it is a subtle attempt to interfere in Nigerian politics on behalf of some foreign agencies?
So there are actions of omission and actions of commission that could be interpreted as interference. As an example, if I'm supposed to do something and I don't do it, knowing very well that the ripple effect of that, my inaction, can create a desirable environment. Or in another example, I do something knowing very well that it will create a desirable environment. It will be very difficult for me to wriggle out from an accusation that I'm not interfering. In this instance, the action has created a near collapse of the economy. One of the biggest malls in Abuja was shut down. I've told you that the hospitality industry is suffering. And frankly, there hasn't been any follow-up action to douse that tension. So it will be very difficult to convince me that this is not an act of interference, whether by commission or by omission. Again, by the time we start the campaign proper, this issue is going to come up. There's going to be references to the fact that the biggest countries in the world, the Western embassies, relocated their non-essential staff from Nigeria as a result of insecurity. And that will play into the hand of the opposition. So it's going to be very difficult, really, to argue that this is not a willful act of interference. It may not be. It may just be a reaction based on certain developments. And we can't discuss this issue without referring to what happened in Benghazi and the outcome of the elections when Hillary Clinton was said to have lost that election as a result of that unfortunate development in Benghazi. Now, that brings me to the question, is it possible that the Benghazi situation repeats itself in Abuja? And I say no, as a security professional who understands the security architecture in Nigeria, it's almost impossible for that kind of situation to happen in Abuja. And if it does happen, then in fact, all of us are in trouble. And so why isolate a few and then leave the rest? And I say this with all sense of responsibility. I also say it knowing the capability and as well as the weaknesses of the Nigerian security architecture. So again, it would be very difficult to convince me that this is either not an act of willing, interference or an act of omission or commission that has led to interference. What is important for me is to look ahead. How do we fix and improve the beautiful relationship that we have with the Americans? How do they help us to come out of this unfortunate situation that we're in at the moment? To that extent, I agree with what Temi Tope mentioned. We need to look closely at our anti-terrorism implementation. I think there is room for improvement in that regard. If I go around Abuja, I see a lot of gaps within our anti-terrorism structure, and the Americans can help us in that regard. Instead of what is happening at the moment, I know that there are several layers of training that the US is helping the Nigerian security department. So what is wrong, for instance, with also helping us in this area of anti-terrorism? If you go to the Homeland Security website or Homeland Department website in the US, you would see different recommendations for the implementation of anti-terrorism. And we don't have that in Nigeria. None of the government agencies have those kind of recommendations. So that's the kind of reaction and partnership I expect to see.
Well, Dr. Kabiru Temitope, thank you so much for joining the program this afternoon and for the great discussion.